Before we dive in, if you love hearing powerful and thought-provoking stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us and helps bring more inspiring content your way every single day. Now, let's get into this incredible story. Jasmine Williams clenched the handle of the mop even tighter, her fingers throbbing from exhaustion. The floor beneath her shimmered under the harsh glare of the office lights, spotless after what felt like endless scrubbing. But none of that mattered to Gerald, the operations manager who never seemed satisfied. He strutted past her, his polished shoes clicking against the freshly cleaned tiles. His sneer was impossible to miss. Without a moment's hesitation, he reached for a cup of water, lifted it, and then, without warning, dumped it straight onto the floor she had just scrubbed clean. The icy liquid splashed not only onto the tiles but also all over Jasmine. Her uniform darkened with moisture, water dripping from her sleeves, her face, and even soaking into her shoes. Gerald smirked, crossing his arms as he looked down at her. "Now you've actually got something worth cleaning up," he spat before turning on his heel and walking away like nothing had happened. Jasmine bit the inside of her cheek, forcing herself to stay silent despite the fire burning in her chest. Her hands trembled as she bent down, pretending to clean, but inside, she was seething. What Gerald didn't realize was that the woman he had just humiliated wasn't just a simple janitor. Jasmine Williams was the daughter of none other than Robert Williams, the CEO of the very company Gerald worked for. And she wasn't here by accident. Have you ever been treated unfairly at work? Stick around to see how Jasmine takes her ultimate revenge. Robert Williams had always been a force of nature, a man who never stopped moving, never slowed down. But the heart attack 6 months ago, that had changed everything. It had been a wake-up call, a moment he couldn't ignore. Now, as he sat across from his daughter at the dinner table, he looked different, older, wearier. The deep lines on his face spoke of concern, his usually powerful voice carrying a weight of exhaustion. "Jasmine," he said, his tone steady but tired. "I need to know what's really going on at the company. I've heard whispers, talk of mistreatment, corruption, things that never make it onto the reports." Jasmine frowned. She had seen those reports herself. On paper, everything looked pristine, but her father wasn't convinced. "I built this company from the ground up," he continued, his voice tinged with emotion. "I need to know if it's still the kind of place I intended it to be." Then, he made a suggestion that left Jasmine stunned. "Go undercover. Not as an executive. Not as my daughter. But as one of the unseen workers, a cleaner. See for yourself how things really are when no one thinks you matter." Jasmine hesitated for a moment, processing the weight of his words. But then she nodded, determination settling in her chest. If this was what it took to prove she was ready to lead, then she'd do it. Besides, she needed to know the truth just as much as her father did. The days that followed were grueling. Jasmine's hands became rough, her back ached constantly, and no matter how many times she washed her clothes, the scent of cleaning supplies clung to her like a second skin. Pushing her mop bucket down the silent, empty hallways at night, she felt invisible. Executives breezed past her without a second glance, too absorbed in their own worlds to notice the woman scrubbing their floors. Those who did acknowledge her existence only did so to complain. And then there was Gerald. No matter how hard she worked, it was never enough for him. He'd point out imaginary streaks on the windows, insisting she clean them again, even when the glass was crystal clear. It was like he took pleasure in breaking her spirit. But he wasn't the only one. Derek, the marketing director, had his own way of tormenting her. He'd call her into his office, make her clean the already spotless room, and then suddenly claim he found a speck of dust, forcing her to start over. Over and over again, just for his amusement. And the worst? Veronica, the vice president of sales. One day, Jasmine had accidentally walked into a conference room at the wrong time. Without hesitation, Veronica had slapped her, hard. The sting of that slap wasn't just physical. It was the crushing realization that no one, absolutely no one, in that room had stood up for her. Reading about workplace abuse in reports was one thing. Living it was another. The company her father built, one that was supposed to stand for respect and integrity, felt like a lie. But Jasmine wasn't just going to sit back and take it. Words alone wouldn't be enough to bring down people like Gerald, Derek, and Veronica. She needed something undeniable. So she got smart. She hid a tiny camera inside her cleaning cart, kept a voice recorder in her pocket, and every single night, she hit record the moment she stepped into an office. Day by day, night by night, she collected evidence. She caught Gerald on video dumping water on the floor just to humiliate her. She recorded Derek's nasty, degrading comments. And yes, even Veronica's slap? Captured in perfect, crystal-clear audio. But as Jasmine dug deeper, she realized the abuse wasn't the only problem. She overheard hushed conversations, talks about secret meetings, missing funds, and shady backroom deals. It didn't take long before the puzzle pieces started falling into place. And when they did, oh, it was bigger than she had ever imagined. Stay tuned for part 2, where Jasmine unveils the shocking truth and takes justice into her own hands. The conspiracy ran deeper than Jasmine could have imagined. A group of senior executives had been quietly plotting behind closed doors, working together to force her father out of the very company he had built from the ground up. Their plan? To seize control for themselves. The risk of exposure was enormous. If anyone caught her, all her efforts, the sleepless nights, the secret recordings, would be for nothing. Her entire plan would unravel, and so would her future. But Jasmine wasn't the type to back down. This wasn't just a company to her, it was her father's legacy. And she refused to let a group of backstabbing, power-hungry executives steal it away. The boardroom was packed, tension crackling in the air like an approaching storm. Jasmine, still in her cleaner's uniform, silently pushed her cart into the room, keeping her head low. Gerald's eyes narrowed. "This is a private meeting. Get out," he barked, his voice laced with irritation. But instead of turning to leave, Jasmine slowly straightened her posture. With deliberate movements, she reached up, pulled off the headscarf she had been wearing, and swapped her plain, cheap glasses for the sleek designer frames she usually wore. The room fell eerily silent. Executives who had ignored her for weeks, who had walked past her as if she were invisible, now stared, jaws slack with shock. Recognition dawned in their wide eyes, their expressions shifting from confusion to fear. Before anyone could utter a word, Jasmine pulled a small remote from her pocket and pressed play. The massive screen at the front of the room flickered to life. First, the footage of Gerald. The entire boardroom watched as he dumped water onto the freshly cleaned floor, onto Jasmine, with a smirk. Gasps rippled through the room. Next, Derek's cruel, demeaning orders. The room filled with his voice, laced with arrogance and condescension, treating her like nothing more than a disposable servant. Then Veronica's slap. The sound cracked through the silence like thunder, followed by a sharp inhale from those watching. And just when the tension couldn't get any thicker, the audio recordings played. Clear as day, their voices filled the room, whispers of a sinister plan to push Robert Williams out of his own company. Gerald's face drained of color. Derek's mouth opened and closed as if trying to form an excuse, but no words came. Veronica's hands trembled, her face twisted in horror. Then, Robert stood up. His expression was unreadable, stone-cold fury beneath a mask of calm. When he finally spoke, his voice cut through the silence like steel. "You're all fired." No one dared to argue. The board, still reeling from the revelations, swiftly voted in support of Jasmine as the new CEO. One by one, security escorted the disgraced executives out, their careers reduced to ashes in mere minutes. Jasmine met her father's gaze across the room. This moment was more than just a victory. She wasn't just Robert Williams' daughter anymore, she was his successor. As the newly appointed CEO, Jasmine wasted no time in making changes. She implemented strict policies to protect workers from abuse, ensuring that no employee, no matter their position, would ever suffer in silence again. Wages were raised for lower-level staff, and an anonymous reporting system was introduced, allowing employees to speak up without fear of retaliation. Slowly, the company began to transform. People started to believe that real change was possible, that things could truly get better. Jasmine understood something that the previous executives had failed to grasp. Leadership wasn't about sitting in a luxurious office or closing million-dollar deals. It was about knowing every aspect of the company, from the executive suites to the janitor's closet. It was about standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. Her undercover mission had come to an end, but the real work? It was just beginning. If you ever discovered corruption at your workplace, what would you do? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't think this is the end of Jasmine's story. Oh no. New enemies are lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. The battle to clean up the company is far from over. Want to see what happens next? Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned.